Yeah, I think, is there anybody else here? Well, I mean, probably some colleagues will come in, but I this space. Sure. Yeah,
Right, good evening everybody and welcome to this evening's executive meeting. Now, I've got a note here, chair to say. Before we start the meeting, a little housekeeping for this evening. Please can I remind all attendees of the following. Please keep your phones on silent or turn them off during this meeting. There are no fire alarms planned, so in the event of a fire, please make your way to the fire exit at the back of the room and follow a member of the staff to a safe evacuation point. Please remember that this meeting is being broadcast on YouTube and that everything you say can be heard. Please remain focused on the topic being discussed, and questions should be directed and specific to the item of the business being discussed. Please respect other members and the position of the chair. Well, I've done my bit. So we now move on to apologies, and we've got one apology from Councillor Bob Fowl, who's on holiday at the moment, but nobody else. Everybody else is in attendance here. Any declarations of interest? You all know your specific positions on all of that. There are no part 2 items from signing of the minutes. Yeah, and of course that was item 2, the minutes to be signed. Are you agree I sign the minutes of the Tuesday the 9th of July and the 13th of August as true records? Mover and seconder. Okay, thank you very much. Yes, well done, Mark. So we now move on. As I said, there's no part 2 items to public questions, and so we have a question here from Peter Cleesby relating to item 6, which is the relocation of council services based in the Civic Centre. Peter, come and join us.
Thank you, Chair. My question is this. In commissioning the study for options for relocating services from the Civic Centre, will the Council rule out the use of the historic Guildhall for committee meetings?
Peter, please do not be offended when I say the answer is no. It's a short answer. I don't know what else I can say. I'm not sure.
Sorry, Peter, the answer is no, we won't rule anything out. I'm certainly not ruling anything in at this stage. I'm not sure whether that helps you or not. So, a supplementary to a response of no.
Right, it's not a surprising answer. I think when considering whether or not committees should be relocated to the Civic Centre, will the Council take account of the disadvantages of that building, such as the audibility, the accesses to the loo and having to parade up and down those awful steps, the separation of the public who sort of sit outside of this box? It's really rather unfriendly, and I could go on, but I'm really just asking if you'd be prepared to look at the downsides of using the Guildhall.
So really you're referring more or less to full council meetings as opposed to committee meetings as such, because we don't have committees in there as such. It's the full council. We are looking at all things at all times. I won't say we are ruling it out because we're not, and I won't say we are ruling it in. We are, as you'll listen to the report in a moment, we are looking at all sorts of things, Peter, and despite what people think, if there is a good idea, we will take it on board. And all these issues about sound and everything else in their recordings, the live streaming, people can't get their internet. We are considering all of that in the round, but I've not ruled anything in or ruled anything out at this moment. But it is a consideration that I think we need to deal with. I think that's a bit better to your second question.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so that moves us on to item 6 of the agenda. And here we have, which is the relocation of council services currently based in the Civic Centre. And there are 2 recommendations. And I'm going to invite Bindu, as head of the paid service and chief executive, to talk to the paper, please, and recommendations.
Thank you, Leader, and good evening, members. So the report before you this evening seeks approval for officers to move to the next stage of planning for a potential move for the council services who are currently in the Civic Centre building to be relocated to a number of sites which are already owned by the council. So the recommendations that are before you are obviously up on the board, and you may come back to that, Leader, but just to go into some of the reasons behind those recommendations. So currently this Civic Centre site that we sit in this evening is identified in the Council's Livable Exeter prospectus in terms of our ambitions around housing delivery as a site for future housing development. And if you agree the recommendations, then we will be able, of course, alongside developing plans for that move, to start thinking about how we enable the work required for the site to be marketed for that purpose. So that is one of the reasons behind it. At the moment, I think members will probably recognise that our existing site is quite challenging. So with hybrid working, we definitely have surplus capacity, not only in the phase that we're sat in, which, as you know, is phase 2. We also have surplus capacity in phase 1, which is where we obviously rent space out to tenants. And in the same way that the council is looking at hybrid working, so are other organisations. So in fact, there hasn't been the appetite for office space that we might have hoped for. And then we obviously have phase 3, which is currently occupied. So just to be clear, the intention would be to relocate, making phases 1, 2 and 3 vacant. So we're looking at the entire Civic Centre site. The third reason is that if we accept that this building is no longer fit for purpose for what we're looking to deliver, particularly in the light of how we work more collaboratively across the council, doing some of that work to understand what a modern workplace needs to look like, we, as you know, are limited in our financial resources. So officers' view is that it makes sense to look at our existing assets as a whole, to see where we might be able to relocate those services, perhaps by bringing up to standard some of our existing sites. Finally, as the work will free up this current site for regeneration, we are able to use the surplus funds from the Guildhall Shopping Centre, which obviously is in the council's ownership, to fund the necessary work, meaning that the council can undertake this work without impacting on the council taxpayer. We will also, of course, then have a greater presence in the city centre, which we feel also is of benefit to the city as a whole. So I think I'll leave it there if I can, Leader. I'm happy to take questions. I've also got Dave Hudson and Joe Yellen, who'll be able to answer questions either about the estate itself or about our plans around hybrid working and digital enablement. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bindu. So, yeah, that's interesting. So I'll open it up to contributions. Any of the leaders want to say something? Michael Mitchell and then Diana Moore.
Thank you, Leader. As you're aware, some of the points I made, or I'm going to make, I made at our meeting earlier in the week, so I do apologise if you had heard that somewhere before. I think all of us can start with a situation where anything that improves the efficiency of the council, improves customer service provision, and is a financial benefit to the council should proceed. I don't think any of us would disagree with that. My concern in regard to this, and particularly in regard to this report, and I noticed the chief executive mentioned other officers or other information, is I personally believe there should be an evidence base before we move forward, because we seem to have almost missed a step. We've started with this was good in principle at council. Yes, we all were supportive of that. Now to a situation where money is being allocated to see the completion or the carrying forward. And what I would have personally liked to see was more detailed evidence in between those two decisions in relation to hybrid working, how our employees feel about that and its efficiency for us. I'd like to know what the unions in particular feel about this movement, and the implications from their point of view, and also a survey of staff generally, so we as members can feed that in when we're deciding to proceed. And I feel that should have come at this stage rather than potentially at a later stage. And as I said, this is not a no-cost situation. There is a cost to us. Right, we're using money that's surplus on the Guildhall Centre, where that could have been used and could be used elsewhere in the city or in the commercial portfolio to encourage small businesses if we wanted them. So there is a cost to us. There also will be a capital cost in future when the buildings are amended, etc., for our needs. And I am concerned that we get the timing right on this. Is there an urgency about it because of the state of this building? Because I'm particularly concerned about the state of the commercial property market at the moment. That is all very well saying this building will be available for housing for sale, but let's point out we've got other sites that are available and not going yet, and no building taking place. There's a number of commercial large-scale sites in the city that are not progressing at the moment. So I think timing might be important in relation to the overall financial impact of this. And I just look for finally, just as a final point of clarification in regard to the two recommendations on, I don't know whether they're two or one. The second one relates to recommendation to cancel. If the executive agree both these recommendations, does it mean the first item has been a resolved item and the second is a recommendation, or do they both, is it a combined one that comes as a recommendation to cancel that we discussed? Because normally the word agree is normally we have resolved or recommended, and I'm not sure if there's a delineation between the 2 points on the motion. Thank you.
Okay, we'll come on to that at the end. I'll ask Simon Cobber on the detail, and I feel sure about the evidence and some of these concerns that you have, I feel sure will be allayed by the Chief Executive and the other officers. Presently, Councillor Moore.
Thank you very much. And I agree in principle this makes a lot of sense, and I particularly welcome the idea of a customer service access point in the Guildhall. In terms of the recommendations, I think there's a number of issues that perhaps need greater clarity, and there's some issues that are silent. Although I do welcome the Chief Executive's clarification that you're looking at all three phases of the building. Just in terms of, the next piece of work, I really do agree with my colleague that the financial savings also need to result in better frontline services and good quality workspace for council staff as an important principle for this relocation. And in particular as well, how we spend our money on this, because the customer service reception area and staff workstations were all upgraded quite recently. Quite a significant amount of investment went into those. And so I do hope that we're focusing on reusing as much as we can rather than aspiring to the glossy pictures and the brochure. I am surprised that there was reference to the future of this site, what happened before and why it didn't come forward, but I'm surprised that there's no discussion about any other co-location with, particularly with Devon County Council, or even consideration of moving to any empty premises that they have in County Hall. So I do think that is perhaps a good idea that you might explore as well. There is an issue here in relation to Bradnich Place. So this is Exeter Phoenix. The council initiated discussions and they're currently in discussion about a community asset transfer. And so I'd be grateful for reassurance that negotiations about an improved partnership way of operating that important community building will continue, and that those discussions won't be compromised as a result of this. I've asked earlier about clarification in terms of the scope of the £100,000, because that I understand, and perhaps we can confirm here, that that's focusing on the plans for the relocation, and actually that money won't be covering how this site can be brought forward for sale. So if that doesn't cover how this site is going to be brought forward for sale, which I think needs to happen in tandem, where is that money coming from, and how will that regeneration plan happen? Because we don't want another empty building in the city centre. And the other thing is, my final point is, in terms of our partners who also share these premises, the police in particular and the CAB. We've just spent 40,000, I think it was, on fixing the roof for them. How will our approach to our partners be dealt with in terms of any future co-location? Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Lena. Just a couple of questions, really. One obviously relates to the fact that we're looking at a number of different physical locations. So just looking to the Chief Exec to respond to how we avoid silo working, etc. We've got a modern way of working now. There's a lot of work being gone into the one council philosophy. So just how that fits into this and how that being in different physical locations will not cause a problem. And the other one I think was touched on, possibly a little misleadingly, just to clarify what the Guildhall surplus derives from, and it's quoted as being ring-fenced. So what does that mean, and how is it not usable to support service provision, which seemed to be what was being alluded to? Thank you.
Thank you. I think Councillor Wright wanted to say something.
Yes, thank you. Councillor Moore has brought up a couple of the questions I had, so I've just got a simple one here now. It's a typo really in the report, but it does sort of change the nature of the reading somewhat. So on page 3, 8.6, where it says outline plans have been developed for the office block and Guildhall Shopping Centre, the floor of the Bradninch Place. So Bradninch Place, of course, is a building that houses the Phoenix Arts Centre. So I'm absolutely assured, having read the report and spoken to officers, that the report itself, it just refers to the top floor of the Phoenix Arts Centre, and the place at the moment is already used by the council for the RAM, some of the RAM offices. So that's the area that we're looking at, not the whole of the Phoenix Arts Centre. But if the word second could be put into that report, or in the minutes, please, could it be minuted, that because it just says the floor of Bradninch Place, it does make you think, does this mean the whole of Bradninch Place? So the omission of the word second floor or partial second floor on that would help. And I'm sure officers may talk about the prospect of the community asset transfer, but having been involved with the Phoenix, I know that isn't something that they were wanting to pursue now at the moment. So that was it. That was my question. Thank you.
Councillor Vizard.
Thank you, Leader. Just to firstly just warmly welcome the paper and the opportunity, I think, which overall, as has been said, is a positive piece of work and something that's I welcome that we're looking at. What in particular, the point 12 on the report, carbon footprint, environmental implications, that there could be a very positive outcome potential, exploration of decarbonisation projects, very much on the council's agenda, as we know. So it would be good, and I welcome the fact that representatives from the Net Zero team will be invited to the project, onto the project team. It would be good to understand how information will be extrapolated and projections in terms of our emissions and so forth, and what exactly that will look like. So I would just welcome a reassurance that that feedback will be sort of fairly high on the agenda going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Anybody else? No. And just before I ask you to comment, Bindo, yes, I mean, from a strategic point of view, I think this makes some sense to look at it anyway, if you know what I mean. We certainly want to bring forward housing. I feel sure you'll be able to deal with any of the concerns, and particularly about evidence. You bring some clarity to it. You'll explain, hopefully, detail about the money that we spent on phase 3, and what we've done there. And also, I don't know whether it'll be yourself or Dave may talk about the £100,000, the ring fencing, and what what we can and what we can't do with all of that, and whether or not any of that will be used for this, or whether or not this will be a separate site. And I don't know whether or not Ian may have something to say about that, but I don't know. But so if you can give us some of the assurances, because this is an important item. It is an important item on it's going to be the look of the council going forward. We've been here in the two phases for a good many years. I can remember this. Oh, can I say I can remember it when it was a car park? How about that? And that's topical. And so I just thought I would mention that. And if you could give us some clarity on all those things, and more importantly, how we will engage the staff and the trade unions.
Thank you, Leader. So I'll go through the questions in reverse order, and I'll pause and ask Dave to answer the ones that relate to the estate or to finance, and perhaps ask Joe to say something about silo working. So Councillor Vizard's question about projections around carbon impact, that is something we absolutely would look to work up in the next stage of the work. So definitely we'll be looking at that. Councillor Wright, the typo, absolutely, it was meant to say second floor, so just to be really clear about that, and apologies, of course, for the typo. Councillor Wood, your question was about the use of the Guildhall surplus, so I'll hand over to Dave on that one.
Thank you. Members will recall when we purchased the Guildhall Shopping Centre, it was after the government had effectively stopped councils from purchasing commercial property using Public Works Loans Board funding, and therefore we had to reach an agreement with the government in order to be able to purchase it because we wanted to protect the asset as a shopping centre long term. So part of that agreement was that any surplus made from the Guildhall Shopping Centre could only be used either to enhance the centre itself or to support further regeneration projects or housing within the city. So therefore we are limited. I can't just allow you to use it to fund additional services. It has to be used for very specific purposes, and this meets those purposes in that it's seeking to release a site for housing.
Thank you, Dave. So the second question, Councillor Wood, was about with the number of different locations, how would we avoid silo working? And I guess my reflection on that is that silo working isn't a factor as a result of location, it's a cultural issue. So members will recall that one of the proposals in bringing forward the new management structure was to address the findings from the LGA's decision-making and accountability about how we might work to reduce silos. So by having a smaller and more focused senior leadership team. So at the moment, we have obviously appointed to most of those posts, with some of them now about to go to external advert. And we now meet as the Strategic Management Board, which is myself, and the directors, interim directors, and the monitoring officer once a week. But perhaps equally importantly, we meet as the extended leadership team. So that's myself, the directors, and the heads of service. We meet monthly. And the reason behind that is that we are all working together on the whole business. So whilst we each will have a responsibility towards the services in our area, our almost equally important responsibility is how we all act together on the whole business. And part of that is absolutely about breaking down where we may have some examples of silo working across the council. I think it's already begun to change, but I think it's something we'll always work towards addressing, if that answers your question. Moving then to the questions from Councillor Moore. So there was a reference to creating better frontline services and better workspaces. So absolutely, that's what we're looking to do. So to be able to have a more modern workspace that enables collaborative working and hybrid working, where some people may be accessing, for example, meetings by a combination of being in person and online, but we're not brilliantly set up for that at the moment. You made reference on expenditure on the current layout of the Civic Centre, and you're right, of course, that very luckily, before in the kind of 18 months before COVID, we did some work, and interestingly led on by Joe Yellen with support from Simon Lane and his team, to get us to understand what working in a more flexible and agile way could be. And that resulted in the Civic Centre layout, which is moving away from everyone having individual offices to having more open plan offices. And that helped to bring together different teams and to allow some of that more modern way of working. But what that also meant is that when the pandemic hit and we were all instructed to work from home, this council, quite unusually, was already set up to do that. So all staff had laptops and everyone could work from home. So I would say, in a sense, that was money well spent, because we were able to carry on providing those essential services to the residents of Exeter under those challenging circumstances. In terms of the questions around DCC space, Bradnage Place, and the possibility of a community asset transfer, although I think Councillor Wright has already addressed that, the 100,000 relocation and that not being part of the budget for exploring opportunities for this site, I'm going to hand over to Dave.
Thank you. So in terms of the disposal, so we have an internal resource who oversees and brings forward our plans for disposal. So who has led on the proposals for disposal around Clifton Hill, around Mary Arches, and indeed City Point, which will be coming forward shortly. So we'll use that internal resource. That internal resource has a budget which can be used to provide any additional support that they may require in terms of developing the proposals that will come forward to members. So I'm not concerned about that. That work will continue alongside the proposal to move to the potential new offices.
Thank you, David. Thanks for that, those answers to those points. I think that demonstrates nicely. Bindi, was there anything else you wanted to come back to?
Sorry, there were,
Go on then.
And there are a couple of other questions from Councillor Moore. So approach to partners. So any partners who have signed a lease with the council are aware of our intentions to vacate the building, because even before we were bringing forward the current plans, there was always an aspiration to look at the possibility of creating a public services hub on the site across the road. So all tenants were aware of that. So in terms of co-location, we are doing some work at the moment to explore co-location in our current customer service site, accepting that will be for a limited period. The challenge about co-locating in other sites is that our primary focus has to be accommodating council staff. And if we look to use more of the Guildhall space to accommodate partners, we then get into a commercial consideration about giving up, obviously, retail space for office space. So at the moment, in the main, our proposals around the Guildhall shopping centre is existing either vacant units or existing kind of office space. So trying to have a minimal impact on our income. In terms, I think those were the majority of your questions. We'll go through if there are any more. Obviously, we're happy to give you answers subsequently. So finally, to Councillor Michael Mitchell's point. So in terms of your question about an evidence base, that's exactly what we're asking for the funds for. So we're not going to go from here are some ideas to here and now the final solution. So the idea behind the funding is that it'll give us the opportunity to do some more work, to be able to understand some of those issues, to make sure that we've got the costs, the size of our ask kind of as specific as we can. Your question about working with unions, we have a formal mechanism to work with our trade unions through the JCNC, and the trade union is also represented on our staff sounding board, which is a group of staff that we use to test out ideas, bring ideas forward, and help us disseminate information. Joe Yellen and Dave Hodgson before had convened a group of staff to work on this with us, so we absolutely want to make sure that staff from across the entire council, not just Civic Centre staff, are involved in helping us to shape those plans. So yeah, we are working with staff, working with the unions. And your point about timing, we obviously, as Dave alluded to, we have skills internally to be able to advise us on when is the best time and where are the best conditions under which to bring forward the civic centre site for marketing for housing. Chair, I think that covers.
I think it covers it very well and demonstrates to me that this just hasn't been a whim that you've thought about, that you've really gone into a lot of detail, and you will continue to do so and keep us brief.
There's one more quick question for Councillor Mitchell.
No more quick questions.
I know it was just on the recommendations, just clarity.
All right, Clarence, Simon, I was going to ask you.
Yeah, I'm happy to answer.
All right, Simon.
Just because the recommendation 1 is for the executive to approve the resolve matter. Recommendation 2 is recommendation 2.
So we understand, Dave.
Sorry, just to absolutely clarify, if the executive agree tonight, that will enable us to bring forward the project group and do all the work to fully understand any implications we've missed in terms of the office move and get us to a position where we're absolutely certain. If council then reject the second part, then we will be unable to go to a full costing and understand the full costs of the move, and we would have to come back at a future date for that. But we could still continue with the internal work to further develop this project and get it in position to get.
Right, we understand, that's quite clear to me on what we're doing. So we've got 2 recommendations, one of which will be the resolved matter, and 2, which is a recommendation which goes to council, as indeed it does. You're perplexed about something, so what are you worried
I'm
about?
perplexed, thanks. No, I was just thinking, if something's resolved, normally it can't be unresolved without falling. But in this case, it could be unresolved without the second.
Well, it wouldn't happen without the second.
No, it just wouldn't happen, would it? No, that's fine, yeah.
The first recommendation would be a resolved matter, and that would allow us to continue with the plan. So that's you saying you want us to continue. The second is asking for a budget to enable us to have a fully designed costing, which is slightly separate. The first part, we can carry on and do the internal project team and get us to a position where we fully understand all the implications. If then the second part, it wouldn't unresolve the first, but it would stop us from having a budget to be able to go that next step of producing fully costed plans to come back to council with.
Thank you. So would it help for future where it says, I was going to say that the executive in 2.1, that executive agrees to resolve, but actually agrees to resolve, actually you just need to say resolve. It's all right, I'm just working it through my head here. I know, I can tell the ex-teachers in the room, that executive resolves that officers, and then we'll know in future that that's a resolved matter when it comes in the recommendation to us. Then we would understand it. Okay. Good, so those are 2. I'm going to. Do I need to move them separately?
I've moved them together as one.
Right, okay. So there's 2 recommendations in front of us. I'm going to move them from the chair. Can I have a second now?
Second.
Yes, Councillor Wright. All those in favour?
That's unanimous, Chair.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Now move on to item 7, the revised local development scheme 2024. There is 1 recommendation in front of us here, and I assume it is Ian Collison's going to talk to the paper.
Thank you, Chair. So this report outlines the latest update of the Council's local development scheme, or LDS. The purpose of the LDS is to really set out the scope and timetable for all the planning policy that the Council is preparing, including the Exeter plan. It's actually a legal requirement to keep it up to date through regular reviews. And that's really due to the lengthy timescales often involved in preparing such things as a local plan. but also, particularly in our case, the complexity around greenfield, brownfield development. So things do change over time. This latest update includes a slightly amended timetable for the Exeter plan, but also some new work to bring forward a piece of planning policy for the University's St Luke's campus along Heavy Tree Road. That latter piece of work is a response to the university's desire to develop a new state-of-the-art future health campus at St Luke's. So the university is developing a master plan as we speak, and that will inform planning policy in the Exeter plan, and eventually being able to set it out, the proposals in the form of a supplementary planning document once the Exeter plan is adopted. So there is an indicative timescale for that work in the draft LDS. Coming back then to the Exeter plan, so there's been significant progress already in bringing forward the Exeter plan, including, you'll recall, a full draft that was subject to public consultation at the beginning of the year. That's alongside other significant work that's been brought forward since the last LDS was published. So we've had a new design code for Water Lane, which has been adopted. A new sill charging regime has been brought into force. We've had a revised SPD on householder extensions and alterations. And last but definitely not least, we've extended the Article 4 direction area across the city for houses of multiple occupation, alongside a new supplementary planning document. So the current timetable for the Exeter plan, which is to publish submission version, was in October, so next month, and then submit it for examination the following March. It's worth emphasising, Chair, that the submission version is the final draft version of the plan before it actually does go to examination. So it's probably the most important stage of the process. The new timetable, which is slightly amended, is proposing to publish the draft publication version in December, January, and then submit it in June 25. So approximately a 3-month delay compared to the current timetable. That resulting 3-month delay, would not result in a later anticipated adoption target, which is still being planned for November 2026. That delay in itself is in the main due to the need to prepare further evidence, which has been in response to that earlier consultation at the beginning of the year. So in publishing this revised timetable, the Council is taking the appropriate steps to mitigate the risks associated with providing a sound local plan and responding expeditiously to various unforeseen circumstances, including some staffing issues, which have now been addressed happily. Just one thing just to add really at the end. So no conversation about a local plan can be without mention of the proposed planning reforms that have been published recently that I'm sure everyone has seen. The most significant one for Exeter is a proposed increase in our housing requirement, which would result in an uplift of approximately 3,400 additional homes by 2041 compared to what we're currently planning for. The Council is committed to bringing forward a new local plan quickly and responding to the need to provide sufficient homes of the type, quality and affordability to meet our residents' needs. Using the government's published transitional arrangements to get the current Exeter plan adopted quickly, that will also enable us to begin planning for the uplift as soon as possible and at the appropriate scale. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. Any questions? Councillor Moore.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Ian, for your introduction. Maybe a question for the leader, really, first of all, to start, and I've got a couple of clarifications to inform the recommendation. So I just wondered if the Labour Executive will be writing to the government to welcome the new targets of an increase of potentially up to 27% additional homes that are anticipated. Just in relation to the recommendation and the proposals in the document, as everybody here on the sitting around the table will know, that there's an informal process of looking through the document, the draft document, and there has been discussion of a supplementary planning document in relation to co-living, and I don't see that as an addition on this proposed update. So can you explain why that is? I'm just also really concerned about a couple of points that are raised that I really feel are important to address. There is a point in relation to the waste and minerals plan, and it talks about basically the City Council accepts the County Council's planning documents. However, the Planning and Compulsory Purchase Act, Section 17(4), does allow for the planning authority to actually improve on some of those details. And I am very concerned about how the development in the city might be impacting on the demand for landfill outside of Exeter in terms of meeting our development needs. And again, in terms of climate change, I'd like to know from the director if you feel that further evidence is required to demonstrate how the local plan meets the requirements of the Planning Compulsory Purchase Act, which is Section 19(1), which is about all the policies as a whole should be designed to secure the development of land use to contribute to the mitigation of and adaptation to climate change. So we have quite an extraordinarily ambitious target of net zero by 2030, but even the 2050 target is extraordinarily difficult to meet, I would imagine. So are we confident that we have sufficient evidence to show how we will meet that? And just in terms of process, I'm not clear, given that there's an informal working group, how the council will decide the publication version. There's no public response built in to the proposed timetable. So, and no explanation of whether there'll be any council scrutiny, or will it go to full council, or will it be an executive decision? And particularly at the publication regulation 19 stage, that's going to have a very limited scope of its consultation in terms of duty to collaborate and soundness and such like. So how and who is going to decide that? So those are my few points on that one. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Moore. Okay, Councillor Mitchell.
There's 2 points. One of which is partly been covered by Councillor Moore, is in the diary log of dates, etc. was the point I think should be included where members are being consulted on this and when the council is making a determination on this plan. That element is missing in the timescales and deadlines set down. I think that should be included. The other one is a minor point which you've already partly covered, because again I mentioned it to the leader at our meeting last week. We welcome the idea of St Luke's and SPD in regard to that, but as you highlighted it, but it's not mentioned in the report or in Appendix A, the University Master Plan comes up for review in 2025, and clearly the St Luke's section of it will be a subsection of the University Master Plan. So it does therefore seem helpful that we should be working with the university to make their master plan an SPD, because it is automatically a document that is referred to in our local planning documents and one that people can consult. But at the moment, we are only marginally involved with that, whereas if it was an SPD, we'd be more fully involved in the development of the university across numerous wards across the city. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Members, any members of the executive? Oh, sorry. Anne, did you want to say anything? Michael's telling me. Nothing new there. Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to thank Ian and his team for the considerable hard work that they've undertaken over the last, well, a couple of years, probably more than that. Significant workload, and to have achieved all of that is very impressive. So thank you for that. Just one point of clarification for me. It's to do with the 4-year land supply that we currently with each plan that's the current limit, isn't it? It's dropped from the 5-year. So does the sort of the change in the timetable affect that, but also the increased housing target that we've got? So if you could clarify where we are with our housing supply, that'd be great.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Anybody else? You certainly can, Councillor Olcott.
Okay. Yeah, just to echo Councillor Williams' remarks about the huge amount of work that's been done with very little capacity, as we've seen in the report, and massive thanks to George Marshall and the team for doing that. I think what's really key here is Ian's point that to make the most of those transitional arrangements, we absolutely have to do everything we can to stick to this new timeline. And I just think that's really important when we're talking about other possible supplementary planning policies. We keep in mind that we really need to be laser focused on getting this over the line. We really don't want to have to go back to the drawing board and start all over again. So it's something we'll be keeping an eye on really closely. Just to come back on to Councillor Moore's approach, I think we absolutely welcome these reforms. It's, you know, we absolutely want to deliver as much housing for our residents as possible. We'll be responding to the consultation on the MPPF, but I think, you know, this is a considerable uplift in housing delivery, and we need to also be realistic that if we want to do that, or if we need to do that with a brownfield first approach, we're going to have to be bold. We are going to have to embrace things like high density, etc., etc. So I think we need to realise the implications of that, and we need to get on board with that and bring our residents along with us on that journey. Just one final question I would ask of Ian is, you know, given this delay and completely understanding where this is coming from, we want to submit something that's really robust, that we know is going to pass examination, that has all the evidence that's underpinning it. Can we just provide some reassurance, and maybe just to sort of reiterate that given the advanced stage of where we are in this process, our emerging plan does still carry some weight in planning decisions that are coming to committee now, and just to provide some reassurance that, you know, despite this delay, we still have emerging policies that do carry some weight. Thanks.
Thank you. Anybody else? No? Okay, thank you. A couple of things here. I'll be interested to know whether or not that this is the document that should be qualifying the co-living, and if it isn't, I'd like to know where it is, because I really want to see an end to that argument, to be quite honest, one way or t'other. I think some of the questions have been quite good, and I was listening to Councillor Olcott there about the necessity of it, and also whether or not that the numbers going up, whether or not our land supply figures go up proportionally, is what you were saying. I'll leave you to decide, Ian, whether or not you can give a full, robust answer in relation to about the climate change, very detailed, and I appreciate that, very detailed, or whether that you can answer some of it, but some of it may need to be followed up. As for writing to government, that's what I used to do. I can actually talk a bit quicker to some of them, and yeah, we are quite pleased that we want to. There's a lot of houses. Exeter is ambitious. We want to deliver homes for people in Exeter. We're having conversations all the time now, and I'm quite pleased that we will be involved in those wider conversations going forward with the Labour government who wants to do this. Now, that is not to say that we're just going to be ploughing up fields and knocking everything down, is what some people may think. There is a process to go through. We will be responding to the MPPF, and I think that's very important that we do all that. and I'm very happy that we remain an ambitious council with regard to housing and for residents, because there is a great need. And I don't know, if we had a couple of older buildings that could be sort of metamorphosed into homes for people, wouldn't that be a good idea? I can't think of any at the moment. Somebody may point to a couple for me. That would be a good idea. So if we can pick up some of those things from the members and the opposition leaders, I would be appreciative.
Thank you, Chair. So I'll take it in reverse order as well. So the 4-year or 5-year land supply issue. So the government has helpfully clarified that for us. So we now, as of when the guidance was published 3 or 4 weeks ago, we're now operating as a 5-year land supply requirement. So the 4-year thing has gone completely. Our current land supply is 5.1 years. So we're good on that at the moment. And looking forward, so the way that that particular part of the planning system operates, the requirement is calculated on the current housing needs basis, not a future one. So as long as we're planning for what we're currently planning for, then we will continue to be within that 5-year land supply going forward. So we won't need to bring in the uplift unless we begin planning for that uplift now. So it's currently 5 years and we've got 5.1. And in terms of the related question from Councillor Alcock about the weight that we can give to our planning policy. So we have an adopted local plan, the core strategy, and those policies carry full weight at the moment. They are ageing policies, and that's a factor. That's a factor that is taken into account when particularly planning appeals. So it's really important that we do provide a more up-to-date local plan as quickly as possible, and that's one of the factors in play here. And the proposal that we're suggesting in the LDS is to do that as quickly as possible, but also recognise that we have to plan for the uplift. And the quicker we get our current emerging plan adopted, the quicker we can then start planning for that uplift. Whilst we're doing that, the weight that is attached to the emerging policy does vary. So at the moment, I would say the consultation draft has got very little weight at the moment. But once we publish the next version, the publication version, as I mentioned, that is probably the final version, that has more weight. I would say significant weight. Once it's been to examination and hopefully adopted, then it has full weight. So it's not quite there, won't quite be there when we publish it and have undertaken the consultation, but it's a long way down the path. And just to pick up a question from Councillor Moore there about and Councillor Mitchell about how we're going to involve members in all of that. So the LDS is a high-level programme. We obviously have a very detailed project plan for this piece of work, and that will set out all the different sub-stages of involving members, involving, really importantly, the public. And I think we have an amazing record in Exeter for the extent to which we involve our people in the planning process. And the success of that is marked by the nature and depth of the responses that we receive. And those responses have necessitated us to do more work on the evidence. And again, picking up another question from Councillor Moore, all the issues that we're now tackling with really are about evidence. The plan, when we publish it, the next version, won't actually look that different. It's what sits behind it. So it is the tip of the iceberg. It is all about the evidence, and that's why the extra work is needed across all the sustainability issues. So there is a process that we undertake called a strategic sustainability appraisal, or an SSA, that covers all the aspects of social, environmental and economic sustainability and the evidence that's required to underpin and meet all the legal requirements of a plan. So all of that is wrapped up in that process. Climate change is just one of them. And of course, anyone that is knowledgeable in that area knows that one factor immediately plays into another. So you have to look at it strategically, hence the need for an SSA. Co-living is an ongoing topic. So Councillor Moore is right that the proposed LDS doesn't include an additional SPD for co-living. That is partly for the reasons that Councillor Alcock has mentioned. We have to be, team is very limited. It's achieved amazing success in the past 2.5, 3 years in producing so much work. But now we're at this absolutely critical stage, and there's a very clear and short window of opportunity to bring forward our plan as quickly as possible. It's vital that we keep focused and the resource is kept focused on that. That's not to say that we're ignoring co-living. There's some co-living developments coming forward. There is the opportunity to look at the policy in the plan itself, as opposed to writing reams of supplementary guidance. So we will always keep a look at that, as we do with every policy, and look at all the aspects and keep them up to date. I think the last question was about waste and minerals, and I think the same answer I gave about climate change. All of that is wrapped up in the strategic assessment, and how we respond to that underpins the legality, if you like, of the plan when we take it to examination.
The status of the university master plan in relation to all of this?
Yes, I forgot that one, sorry. So the university master plan is, as far as I know, is a document that was endorsed by the council. It doesn't have planning status as such, but the elements of it were brought into the core strategy. It is true that that is needing to be updated. I mean, that would be something for the university initially to come to us, and I do talk to the university on a regular basis. It's not true to say that in producing a master plan for St. Luke's, that would be a supplementary to the main campus. They will be different, and will be different documents and different processes. So they've drawn a red line around St. Luke's campus, as there is a red line around Streatham. So they will be looked at differently and under different processes.
Thank you, Ian. So we've got one recommendation before us. I'm going to move from the chair. Can I have a second, please? All those in favour?
That's unanimous, Chair. That has been carried.
Thank you very much. We now move on to item 8, which is risk management policy. And Dave Hodgson.
Thank you, Leader. So members will be well aware that the council has been working with York Municipal insurers over the last couple of years to look at ways to significantly strengthen our approach to risk management. And this is the next stage of that. So before you is a risk management policy which outlines our approach to risk management and sits above the strategic corporate risk register, which you will be considering at the next meeting. So in terms of the policy, I'm not going to go into much detail. It basically covers our objectives in relation to risk management, the approach that we undertake, responsibilities and procedures for risk management, and then you will note at the end a commitment to review the policy every 2 years. So you will be seeing this on a fairly regular basis. The approach, the policy has been updated to reflect the changes that we've made to the corporate risk register and our approach to risk management. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, David. Before I do, on my risk register, it was red. Turn your phone off. mitigate, do it before the meeting. So I didn't follow it. So that's one risk I didn't deal with. So leaders, Councillor Mitchell.
Maybe just two brief points. And again, the leader is aware of these, mentioned them before, that when this matter comes to the executive or comes to board and governments, there's a role of accountability for portfolio holders because they answer the questions on these in their service areas. There is no mention of a role for portfolio holders in the structure that you've got here. It talks about heads of service, it talks about the leader of the council. And I would have thought that at some stage you would want to build in a reference or working with the portfolio holder to give us that link as members to be able to ask questions of portfolio holders. I'm not an expert on risk management. I know it's an industrial business all of its own, but something seems missing in this. Where do we get elaboration on the identification of initial risk? How that is done? There's just a line in here. Is there a separate document? And nowhere do we appear to have a system where we remove the risk. The risk ceases to be a risk. So is there a methodology that allows you to remove risks from your register? Because I do remember from the previous one, we did have Brexit as a problem for about 4 or 5 years on our risk register. Now it's disappeared. So I'm just wondering, hey, how do we identify them, or whose responsibility to identify them, and how, if possible, is it that they are removed? They don't permanently stay there. Thank you.
Okay, we'll pick some of those things up at the end. Councillor Moore.
Thank you very much, and thank you for this updated policy. Something that we've been grappling with on the Audit and Governance Committee as well. So I would just like clarification. I particularly welcome in the objectives the need to enhance and protect the local environment. Big thumbs up for that. But I'm really wondering why there's no similar objective in terms of the role of the council for enhancing and protecting the citizens of Exeter and those who visit it. So that seems a big omission to me. I'm concerned that there's nothing in here. It talks about the preparation analysis of risk, etc., and how it's handled, but there's no body responsible for taking action when the risk remains very high or becomes unacceptable. And I would perhaps see that as a separation from the role of the executive from the senior management board in actually offering that challenge to actually addressing those risks. And there isn't any mechanism for doing that because the role of the executive and the SMB is put in here as one and the same. And in terms of the role of the Audit and Governance Committee, we've been very much told that the role of the Audit and Governance Committee is in relation to looking at the processes that have developed the risk register, and are these sufficient to actually produce a risk register which is robust. This policy reverses that we consider the corporate risk register and recommends its approval to the executive. So I'm quite interested why that's being flipped around, and conversely, the responsibilities of the executive, it says that the executive has responsibility for approving the policy. It doesn't say it has responsibility for approving the risk register, which links into my colleague's contribution about responsibilities of portfolio holders. So yeah, I did read it a few times, but it talks about approving the risk management policy, and then the audit and governance role is about the risk register. So I do think there perhaps needs to be some clarifications about this, because we have had a number of discussions about whose role is to do what thing. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Members of the executive. Opinion on the policy, Councillor Wright.
Thank you. At page 99, there is reference to the executive and strategic management board. So we are responsible for approving the policy, but also it's point 2, affirming and supporting the work of risk management throughout the council. Now, this is a really important part of the work that portfolio holders do within their own areas and with their directors under their directorship. So as pointed out last time we discussed this, we all know we've been through a period of having 2 elections and also a management restructure. So we may have not for a few weeks being able to dig very deep the way that we would normally do. But it is part of the way that this is working, that we will be regularly reviewing our sort of areas, if you like, of each part of risk. And then this all goes to the leader, who quite rightly has overall responsibility for accepting, managing those risks and making those decisions. So I just wanted to point out that as a member of executive, I'm quite happy with this policy, and don't think that it does actually exclude elected members from it. Perhaps it's just the wording of executive and strategic management board. Maybe you think it was an executive board that was operational, but it does actually mean the elected executive. Thank you.
Thank you for clarifying where the buck stops. Councillor Alcock.
Thank you, Chair. Just a response to Councillor Mitchell's point about process for removing risk from the register. I mean, I think to Councillor Wright's point, because we're now owning this within our portfolios, this document is going to be a living document, and it's going to evolve as the work evolves, as the mitigations are put in place, etc. And I mean, for me, it's quite simple. If there's a methodology within the risk register that once you've put your mitigations in place, you have residual likelihood, residual impact. If that goes to green or if that goes below a certain number, presumably it's not so much of an active risk we have to monitor. So I think this will just come through as we're monitoring it within our portfolios.
Okay, is there anybody else? No, and if somebody can tell me why Brexit is no longer a risk, I'll be quite interested in all that. David.
Thank you, Leader. I'm not going to try to suggest why that is or isn't on the risk register any further, but just to reply to some of the comments and queries that have been raised in terms of the responsibility of portfolio holders. Yes, we've classed it all together as the executive. The executive consists of portfolio holders, including yourself, Leader, and therefore we felt that covered your responsibilities within this. In terms of your responsibilities alongside the Strategic Management Board to continually monitor the risks, that will allow for the opportunity for risks to be proposed to be removed. They would be removed by the executive at the meeting. Councillor Mitchell, you asked a question in between that, which I unfortunately didn't manage to come down. So I got the removing the risks, and I got
the identification of risk and removal of risk. Well, there is more details on.
So those are a part of the responsibilities of the portfolio holders executive alongside the Strategic Management Board. We've tried to be concise within the policy to make it a readable and usable document. Councillor Moore, in terms of protecting citizens being missing, that's one for us to go away and look at and consider, I think. In terms of taking action, that clearly rests with council. So if there's a particular risk that is unacceptable, it's responsibility of the management team to bring something to council to look to address that. And in terms of why the role of audit and governance has flipped, so yes, you will notice that the corporate risk register is not here tonight, and yet will be at audit and governance later on in September, and then is going to go to the executive. Actually, that's the way it's set out in financial regulations as the approach to take. So the policy merely reflects the constitution, and therefore we're changing the approach to bringing them. So it will come first to audit and governance for consideration before going on to the executive.
Thank you, David. Is there anything to add to that? No. Okay, so we've got one recommendation there, which I'm going to move from the chair. Can I have a seconder, please? All those in favour, please show.
Actually, that was Chair, that hasn't carried.
Thank you very much. That brings us to the end of the meeting, and the next one is on the 1st of October. Thank you very much.
Simon Lane.